actually not well, so that's great. Sorry, it's not great. He's not great, but it's great that we're all here. Is what I'm trying to say. Subject to -1. Okay, we have a final item in terms of
Excuse me 1 second, Bruce. Terry won't be joining because there's a power failure. Well, it's not there's a power turn off in Whangamata, so he will not be joining us.
Right. So he was. Thanks, Gary. So he was going to join us at 10:30, but obviously
no. He rang me to explain the problem.
I appreciate it. Okay. So we can just, if we can update the minutes to note it as a full apology, which is cool. So our final item in public is project delivery update. And I think we've got Ian here. So welcome, please. Thank you. Appreciate your presence. In your hands. Go for it.
In my hands, thank you. Good morning, councillors. It feels like I'm here quite a lot at the moment, so good to see your faces again. Just want to say I've got Lorenzo Canal, who's the acting programme manager, online as well. So Lorenzo will answer any questions around delivery as far as at the moment, if you have any questions around that.
Behind your laptop.
Thank you very much. I'll take the report as read. Obviously, the background, we had the issue with the Whitianga RTS in August. We then said, let's do a health check and see if there's any systemic issues. That was done in September. At the time, some issues identified, but we said that we need to make some wider programme management improvements, and with a focus of increasing the delivery of the current CapEx programme from an average of 60% to something around 80–85% at the moment. Since September, Lorenzo has taken on the acting programme manager role and really making a lot of on-the-ground changes with the project managers at the moment. We've implemented monthly governance in place, so that's for all the delivery projects for this financial year. So we check through every capital delivery item, assess the scope, schedule, risk and finance baseline on a monthly basis. So yesterday at deliberations, I was jumping out to have those sessions with the team to update that monthly. We have also initiated exec programme steering groups in place for key projects, like Kopu project and other key projects, and that will be implemented more as we go into next year. And in addition to that, we've had a look at the assessment of deliverability as part of the long-term plan project to see what is realistic for the team to deliver. As far as the further PM improvements, it's focused on 3 areas, so people, processes and tools, which is a standard thing. And what we've agreed to is a project management methodology. So that's a document that really fleshes out how we will run project management within TCDC. Initially focused on the CapEx delivery programme, but that can be used and rolled out for OpEx projects as well. So what you see in front of you and on the screen is really the kind of key 7-step process that we'll be applying. So we wanted to keep it quite simple. There is lots of Prince2 methodologies, Project Management Institute methodologies, but actually they become really quite complex and quite, I will say, not necessarily fit for purpose for TCDC. Some of them are for the really large projects, but a lot of them we need something simple and something that can be implemented to manage the risk. So what you see in front of you is step 1, approve the project list. So obviously during deliberations, you've been running through those capital delivery projects for next financial year. Currently, we've got 117 CapEx projects in the list for next financial year. Now, I've not reassessed that based on your deliberations, but going into deliberations, it was that number. That sounds like a scary number, but out of that, there's probably around 16 of them that are identified as higher risk or higher complexity projects. So it's not a massive amount, and probably around that number, there's around 12 that are medium value, medium risk. The remainder of the 70 are lower risk projects, so 50 projects are under 100K. and there's 20 that are slightly higher value, but they're renewal projects, so don't require that level of rigor around that. So once we agree a project list of what you want the team to deliver, we then classify the project and assign resources. So when we say we classify the project, we look at the complexity, we look at the rigor that we need to apply. So we've got different rigors that we apply depending on the complexity. High risk projects, so maybe things like your aquatic centre or your Thames HQ, type projects when you get to that. Would be higher risk projects, not something you do on a day-to-day basis. Requires a level of rigor. We need to think about at the beginning what level of governance we put in place for those projects, what level of quality assurance you put in place for those projects. So do you need independent design reviews? Do you need, what type of quality do you need to put in place in order to manage the risk? So that's for the higher complexity projects. For the major, so that's things like your standard, I'll say, ICT kind of portfolio projects that falls in that kind of 100 to 500k kind of list, and we need to put a level of rigor, but it's not as much as what you would normally apply to those higher risk projects. For the higher risk projects, normally you have external project managers that come in and deliver that, so specialists that come in and deliver that. Your medium projects, your project delivery team within council that generally deliver that, and your low risk projects under 100k, you've got people within the department who are classed as project managers for all intents and purposes to deliver that, and that's entirely appropriate. So we're working through that. We've just finished the classification for all your 25 projects now, and we are just about to jump into detailed baselining.
Sorry, thank you. So you're talking about the folks that are within the organisation. So these could be the parks and reserves people that are delivering the smaller projects. So they will be going through the same project management process for those smaller projects than we would for any other project.
It's much simpler. So for the higher complex ones, we will have quite detailed scopes. We'll have detailed Gantt charts with, so quite detailed things. For the smaller projects under 100k, one pagers. They should still identify the baseline and what success looks like, but not to the rigor of those really high complexity projects. But they'll all follow the same process and be trained in this process.
Go on then, Peter.
You mentioned that there was a monthly governance program for the larger ones. Can you just describe what that looks like? Who sits on that group? What sort of reporting is there? And on the basis of what we have seen, is that the right level of governance? Should perhaps there be someone from this group involved in that as well?
Can I maybe ask Lorenzo, would you mind answering that one just in relation to what you put in place for example, COPU?
Okay, hi everybody. Yes, COPU is a good example where it's a complex project. It's got quite a lot of risk associated with it. So for that one, as an exemplar, we set up a project steering group meeting, and the members of that meeting are Peter Reville to represent a key stakeholder who's got skin in the game in terms of the Thames Community Board. We've also got the chief executive due to the nature of that, and we've got the general manager, and also myself as an external project manager. That group meets every quarter. In addition to that, all the way through the project, from the beginning, an exception, we've had the next tier down is a project control group that meets it usually meets, it depends on the stage of the project. Sometimes it meets as often as every month or every fortnight. And that is the sort of the level where we've got the project manager, usually the design lead, and various managers within council who are responsible for delivering that job. So that's an example of a large one. So some large projects like the RTS, Totra Valley, etc. We need to form those types of those governance groups for those. We've got to get the balance right as well in terms of if we set up a high level governance for every project, you'd be in meetings we'd be tying up everybody in meetings. In terms of the getting the most out of those governance groups, monthly reporting by exception is really important, so that at the meeting people have read the report, and it's really just a matter of getting to the important issues that need direction or addressing, and the status of the project to get efficiencies. And that's how it's been running on the Kopu job, for instance. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you very much. I just think, it would be good to get that structure in place sooner rather than later in regard to the higher level group, particularly, bearing in mind things like the RTS history and need to make sure that we continue with the policy of bad news travelling faster than good news if possible.
If I could just speak to the RTS one, and Mo might want to add too, when we actually perhaps I might talk to you in the break about that. There's some matters I'd like to talk to you in the break about.
Thanks, Aileen.
Just a few questions here. So firstly, we're talking here, we're not talking IT projects. I assume IT have their own methodology, their own approach, etc., etc.
So yes, so they run an agile project management approach. This higher level approach entirely fits with agile as well. So yes, but they'll be running, I will say, more of a portfolio of projects, because it's a range of projects underneath the portfolio that they're running. But it still follows the same overall kind of structure, but underneath that, there's more complexity for their projects.
So therefore, I guess the question I'm asking, does the program office, is that also sitting across IT projects?
The answer is they still manage and deliver their own projects, but they will follow a similar structure, and they'll use the same tool that we'll be using for the overall project management methodology. So, for example, as we baseline, I'll be sitting down with Jan just to say, what does good look like for the year? What do you plan to deliver for the year for both software and hardware projects, both identified as capital project lines?
So perhaps a question, Aileen, the work that we've been doing, is this across all projects, or is it specifically related to the projects we're doing out there in the world?
In due course, we want to have an alignment of processes across the organisation. We are starting over, I keep pointing across there, but it is the operations area. We have a project management team that handles, I can't remember, 30-40% of our projects, and so it'll be run out of there, and manage the processes will be wrapped around their projects. But we also have projects happening in other activities, and particularly in the operations area, they will need to be aligned with this. Over time, we'll get to those wider organisational projects and bring about some alignment with this, but also need to appreciate that it's our big capital stuff that is where the big risks sit. When somebody's hiring a consultant to do a piece of work, it's much less risk. So we'll leave that as a lower priority to get aligned with the system in the first instance.
Thank you. So putting IT projects aside, when we do these things, because of how we work as an organisation, we don't actually do it. We have contractors that do it all. And so we would be very reliant on the project management capability of our contractors, whatever the project might be it a wharf, be it a playground, or whatever. So it seemed to me that the real key value that we bring is in the first part, and then into a governance function, rather than actually into a project management function, because at the end of the day, the contractors are doing it.
So I tend to agree. There's a large amount of subcontract management component rather than true project management component to this, and you'll see as we step into project delivery, there's key gates. You know, so you will have different professional services delivering your design, your consenting, your land acquisition, separate to those that are delivering your construction project, for example. But it's how we come up with really good approaches early on in the project delivery to manage that. Do you do a design build or do you subcontract that out separately? But you're right, there's a large amount of subcontract management, but that's all within the realms of project management, the way that we're looking at this.
I guess in the couple of examples we've talked about, the Refuge Transfer Centre, Totara Valley, etc., where it's come unstuck is before we've actually had the contractors engaged. That's where things seem to me to have come unstuck. So I would be wanting to feel that pre-engagement stuff, the stuff before we actually get the shovels in the ground, is the stuff that we're really making massive changes to, because after that, then it becomes a contract management issue rather than a project management issue. So
I agree.
And with that, I'm saying, reinforcing John Grant's comments about the strategic significance of good governance in that whole process before we actually engage contractors.
So, you know, from this perspective for TCDC, there's probably two key risk areas. One is the baseline. How good is the baseline that we've set for projects? You've just agreed a list of projects for delivery as part of your annual plan and long-term plan. How robust are those baselines? And do they have schedule float? Do we have appropriate contingency? Are they good? And I think the early flag that we'll be doing just now, so myself and Lorenzo are working with the project managers to review the baselines, to set the baselines and make sure that it's all very transparent and we can deliver that successfully. Because when the team prepare these baselines, they prepare project request forms, and that's great, but how well fleshed out are the risks, the schedule contingency and everything around that? So that will give you early visibility for your delivery for that year. The next key risk area, as you say, is that design, consenting and land acquisition. If I look at the last 3 years delivery, any large delays has been around those three areas. You know, fundamentally, you know, a complexity around design, a delay in land acquisition or a delay in consenting. That's your risk area. So that first step of delivery, I totally agree, that's your risk area that needs to be well managed. And what we plan to do through this process is for the higher complexity projects, to make sure there's clear gating in place, early visibility of any design issues, and clear gating before you move into construction, that you've got a signed off design, that everything's in place, so that you're right. By the time you get into design, that's where your high cost area will be, because that's where a lot of the costs are. But by then, a lot of the risk will be mitigated through that design process.
Can I continue? So do we, as a matter of course, have these significant projects coming to the risk and assurance meeting each quarter?
Look, Peter, I just want to check. I mean, we're talking about you're talking about program governance from an operational perspective, by the way, not from a governance as an elected member perspective, correct? So, I mean, I totally take the point, Peter, that the upfront specification, the procurement plan, and the approach you're going to take is actually pivotal. Whether there was any necessary need for elected member involvement might be a different story. I think this committee, from the perspective, and I think I made this comment last time, Lorenzo and Ian were here, was the carrying out of the capital program on an annual basis is a matter of risk, which I would like this committee to have a level of oversight on.
Yeah. For
two reasons. One, a failure to carry out the capital program has potentially knock-on impacts, whether that could be, and it depends what doesn't get done, but I'm I'm seeing around the country pressure on getting renewal work completed. In which case you're then starting to say, are we sweating our assets too much? You start to get failures. In effect, you start to get a breakdown in service. Or if it's new capital items you're trying to do and you don't do them, you aren't providing the service you've promised to your community. So there's a delivery aspect about actually what are the outcomes that are being delivered. An equally important part is that capital delivery is pivotal to our treasury management position. In other words, our debt position. And indeed how we manage our debt. And I'm conscious that it wasn't probably anybody in this room, well, other than one or two members, but staff, where essentially we inherited a position where forward positions were taken on debt on the assumption capital would be carried out, and it never was. And council bore cost. So there's a reason for us from a risk perspective to see it. It's a wee bit different to actually just what's in the guts of this diagram behind Ian here about actually time, cost, quality. I mean, they are risk matters, but they're ones which I'm encouraged that you guys are working through would be really an operational matter.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Can I maybe go on to the next slide? Because that's governance slide is the next slide I've got actually, which might help explain what we are thinking as far as reporting. And I think maybe there's a discussion around governance, but as far as reporting and what we expect to be reporting for these larger complex projects and what that means and what that looks like. And you might have some other questions on governance. But
I think that helps, Bruce, because I think what I'm hearing you say, we do need to be absolutely across our capital works program and how that's tracking.
At that top level.
Yeah.
Can I call it that strategic level? Are we delivering it better?
Yeah. Yep.
So just from a governance perspective, sorry, and I'm going to slightly just look at the side. So on a regular basis, larger projects, they'll have a project delivery team in place. They'll meet up weekly. They'll run through what's happening, regular discussions. On a monthly basis, we run those RAG reports, which is what we showed to you before. They're quite high level though. I mean, they don't get into a level of detail in the individual projects. They're quite high level. How are things tracking? How are we going? Do you need any support? And look, and I will say the focus of those discussions are what support do you need to successfully deliver? You know, this isn't to call people out. This is what do you need in order to successfully deliver? We've then got the exec program steering groups, and that example that Lorenzo talked to around COPU. Obviously, as we step into 24-25 delivery, I've said there's maybe 16 projects. Now, maybe not every single one will need that exec steering group, but things like, for example, maybe Aquatic Centre, if you go Thames HQ, Whitianga Artists, some of them will require that exec steering group, and that's a lower level down. That talks about any key risks issues. It talks about contingency management. It does get into a lower level of detail, which is entirely appropriate to manage the risk. And then on a quarterly basis, we'll be providing briefings through to the exec leadership group as well. As far as outputs and external reporting, obviously there's external funders and reports to external funders. There's community board reports, and then there's obviously this group here. So our expectation is that we can pull these reports easily, because when we've got the tool in place, they just shoot out, you know, and that information is available. So our expectation is on an ongoing basis, we'll be able to report on those 16 key projects, if that's what you want to see. Regular reporting around the red, amber, green on everything, similar to the reports that you've had before. So that's our expectation, that we will set up a tool that can deliver all of this. So the team aren't having to, you know, prepare different reports for different people that say different, you know, it's just, we will take it at that point in time and we'll pull a report, because they're updating this information on a monthly basis. So that's the expectation. The tool will deliver this, and then obviously if there is more information required at a governance level that you need to see, then again that can be tabled and discussed.
So I've got Martin, sorry, Martin's being patient, Robin. So I'll let Martin ask his question, then you, Robin.
Yes. Oh, my initial question was, sort of obviously we're governance, but then some of this might kind of be some operational stuff. How, and this might be a question for Aileen, how do you see the elected members most effectively being able to contribute to this? Is the current thing, and Peter's mentioned a couple of projects locally here that yeah, we feel we've had a good handle across because we've had Councillor Revel looking after both of them, as well as another community board member. But yeah, do you feel that's a good arrangement? Is it, how can we make it better?
I've probably got a couple of perspectives on it.
Yep.
Firstly, if I think about me, I'm on three steering groups, and that's about enough. That's quite a big impost on time. And when I think about the GMs, they'll be on maybe 4, and that's enough for them. So there's a need to be moving things along quickly and having flexible dates and stuff like that. So the more governance you layer into it, the harder that becomes. So there's a trade-off between agility and good use of time in terms of actually the logistics of delivering these, putting aside the theory of it. I'm going to say that Corpu has worked really well. Peter's brought a huge amount of value to that. I'm not sure that level of oversight is needed on some projects. I think the challenge is probably those local projects that are highly visible, as opposed to necessarily our, if you take our big capital delivery, you probably don't need councillors sitting in a number of those projects. I think it's more about those little, no, not little, but it's more about the high local interest ones. And I'm not quite sure, I'm not sure what the answer to that is.
Yeah, because I mean, I don't think elected members get asked, oh, you know, how's that new aerator going in a treatment plant, or how's the filtering for your water drinking standards. But I think the ability of elected members to be on a small number of the projects, but if we get asked something by, you know, one of our ratepayers, to be able to say, oh yes, we had a report about that last week. There's been a slight delay due to whatever it might be. I guess us being able to have that information, not necessarily sitting in on everything, because like you say, there's a limit to, you know, I want projects to go ahead smoothly and quickly, agilely, without a whole lot of governance necessarily. So
there's a question there, isn't there, between the aggregated style of reporting, here's our top 10 projects and here's where they're all at, versus a councillor being inside a project in a sort of a project governance role. So that there's two different things there. The aggregated stuff, you know, that's what we're talking about here, and that's, you know, clearly that's something we need to be doing. How we deal with individual projects, I'm still not sure.
Okay.
And sorry, maybe just to respond to that, I think having a clear process for exception reporting, you probably don't need to know if things are on track, but you definitely need to know if things are going off track. And you probably, you know, on that quarterly basis, when we do reporting, we generally say this is what we've done in the last 3 months and this is what we plan to do in the next 3 months for those key projects. So having that information available so that if you're ever asked, well, you know, this is what they're working on. But I think that transparent process about escalations, we need to kind of figure out how best to do that. So something's been flagged, we need to let you know how do we do that and what's the process. Sorry.
And I guess a further thing to that would be also if that's appropriate to communicate out to the community. So in fact, you know, people do have an understanding that, look, it's going to be another month because of whatever, but managed.
Yeah, and again, that should tie in with the community board reporting as well, on linking in with the community board reporting, common messages, common updates, so that everyone's seeing the same information and it's not different information. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Robin.
actually, that was one of my points, because it's all very well to have somebody, sitting on the steering group, and that's, one particular role, but I don't think that the onus of having to then report back to every elected member should fall to the shoulders of that person. And, one of the things that we've not had in this term is members' reports, which I don't miss particularly much, except that would be a really obvious vehicle for where you get that information. But one thing that I have really appreciated throughout the COPU project, so more so this term than last term, is that as well as our CapEx program update, we've actually had a separate page to say, this is this biggest project. This is what people are going to ask you about when you're trying to choose which bananas supermarket. They're going to ask you, so this is the information that you need about this specific project. And that's worked really well. And that would be something that I'd advocate for all of the different wards. And, knowing that it would be coming to a report. So when a big project is happening in Whitianga, as an elected member, I know that I'm going to get questions about the RTS in Whitianga. But I know that there's a meeting the week after we have our community board meeting. There's a community board meeting there. I can go to the agenda pack and I can look and I can just get that information really easily. So it's knowing where the information is and how easily to get it that would be really helpful for us.
And I think that standard reporting, quarterly reporting, this is what we're doing over the next 3 months. Also getting copied in on any of the community board reports, because the community board reports might be offset from your last meeting where we're just giving them slightly more recent information. So just making sure, and again, it will be consistent, but it's all pulled from the same tool and the same information source, which is really key for us.
Thank you for that. That's been a very useful discussion. Are there any more questions for Ian or Lorenzo? I just had one. Oh, sorry, you've got some. You've got more slides.
So, no, I don't have any more slides. I just wanted to give just a quick update. We're working through vendor assessment on a project management tool at the moment. So a decision. I see Jan's in the room, who's obviously a key part of that decision from an ICT perspective. So look, we're looking to do a recommendation on that next week. But again, the whole purpose of the tool is to make it simple, to make it actually easy to use for the team, but to drive all of these reporting requirements. We do not want the team to be having to update 10 different reports on a regular basis, and we want really good integration with the finance systems and the risk systems. So we're working with PACU to make sure, again, that kind of capital risk delivery approach is really clear and that we're managing that well. So I just wanted to mention that as well.
Brilliant. No, look, thank you. And look, the only other observation that I wanted to make from the paper, which hopefully is a positive one, is that as I understand it from reading the paper, while there's actually, and I've heard good work over COPA or things like that, essentially there is a phase here where you're working hard now as a team, probably it's Lorenzo more than anybody else, in terms of trying to drive preparation for 24-25 capital delivery. Which, of course, is not a bad idea because it's with us pretty soon and takes a lot of preparation.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, we've used everything that's already been prepared for the long-term plan, the project request forms, the information that's available, and we're reassessing that now with the assigned project manager who's responsible for delivery and working through that baseline. That's really key for us because that baseline needs to include, as the contingency details and also schedule flow, so that we can make ourselves set up for success for the year ahead. So that's what we're really focusing in on over the next, I would say, 6 weeks, so that we're ready for 1 July, and actually we've got a really clear baseline. We know what we're delivering, the team know what they're delivering, and we've also worked through that resource allocation as well.
Brilliant. No, that's music to my ears, Ian. So look, I wish you and Lorenzo the best for that. And I probably have put a small plug that the committee is kept on top of this, and I'm appreciative that you folk have come back for this meeting. And I suspect, as you can see, if my arguments hold any weight, that we should see a bit more of you as well as we go forward.
Sorry, can I just add one more thing? Sure. So just as we ran through this methodology, behind that there's a RACI matrix, so who's responsible, who's accountable, who contributes and who's informed in the project. What we've identified though is there's a large number of community-led projects that actually council aren't really responsible for, but we are involved in. And so I'm sitting down with Lorna's team tomorrow to work through what does a RACI matrix look for those locally led projects and what's the involvement of council in those locally led projects. And again, it's to get real clarity around, well, what's our responsibility as council? Because I think there's been issues in the past where it's been felt that we are leading a project, but we're not. You know, the community's leading it, but we do have some involvement, you know, or that we contribute into those projects. So how do we really be clear about what's our role? And especially, I will say, for the smaller cost projects, because it can suck a lot of staff time if suddenly we are leading and delivering it. So this isn't to get out of things, but it's to be really clear around what our role is in those more community-led projects.
Yes, Martin, final question, please.
Yes, and I would very much support that. I know, I'm sure every ward has had a group who say, hey, we want to put a sculpture up, and there's a lot of feeling that sometimes it can just take, oh, well, you need this, and then they get that, and then a month or two later, oh, you also need this, and they can really, really drag out. So I would hugely value and appreciate some community projects being able to be included in that. That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Martin. Do I have a mover and a seconder for this paper, please? Thank you, Dolly. Rika? Thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, this carried. Ian, thank you for that. And to Lorenzo, obviously,
Thank you.
there somewhere.
Yep, I'm back here.
Very encouraging from eliminating a level of uncertainty and risk around capital delivery that I sense is going to be new for us, but going to be very, very valuable. Now look at the last item we do in public, which is the motion to move to exclude the public. It's on page 142 of your agenda. Thank you. Is there any discussion on the matters we propose to take into PX? There's not. Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, is carried. We just give D a couple